Thank you, everyone, for the warm welcome and for having me. I thought I'd use this opportunity to show a project that I almost never show. And the reason is it's a departure a little bit from what we usually do, and I think a kind of new direction for us. But also because I think it's the least egotistical project that we've ever done. And that's probably what maybe I have to say today, is that maybe design is, maybe the ego in the design process is maybe something we should question or think about a little bit. The project is called 41.1, and it was originally a proposal that we did for the Vancouver Art Gallery for the recent, as an exhibition system for the recent Surrealism exhibition. If you remember, a few months ago it closed. So this was, in essence, a design competition that we lost. Someone else won, a Parisian designer, I think, or something like that, and we never got to build this. But in the process of the competition, we came upon something, we discovered something, and that's what I'm here to tell you about. Okay, so there was a very severe budget restriction, and the piece had to be easy to dismount and put up in a few days. We invented essentially a process. And so the first step of the process, as you can see, is taking some hay bales and wrapping them in plastic sheet. And I think that what I'll do is I'll just walk you through the way that we made this thing, and then later describe why I think it's interesting or important. Okay, so there you can see all these hay bales, if the slide works. It's not. There you go, okay. So there they all are. And we had about, I don't know, 80 or 90 of them for our little prototype. But if this had gone into production at the Vancouver Art Gallery, we would have had thousands of hay bales. So it was kind of exciting. This is in our building. I guess I have to get the hang of this. So then, there they all are. The next step is to basically build a plywood armature. And if we were to make this a real thing for the Vancouver Art Gallery, instead of plywood, we would have used aluminum. The boxes that you see are essentially would have been designed to house the artifacts, the either sculpture or the paintings of the exhibition. And inside the boxes, we would have had all the security equipment that's required for art of that caliber, and also temperature control and all that kind of stuff. But in this case, you can see that we're shoving hay bales into the open boxes, and then later just stacking more and more hay bales on top of this exhibition armature to make a mountain, a giant mountain of hay bales. And then we hire this lady to spray foam on the entire back of the assembly. So I'll just show that again. Oops. So this is insulation foam, and you can get a soy-based one that degrades over time. It's essentially the same stuff that's used on the ceilings of parkades. It's really, really cheap. You spray it, and it provides insulation value, but it's also really rigid and quite strong. And also, it expands in a really nice way. So when you spray it, it just kind of foams up like that, which is kind of amazing. So if you imagine spraying a lot of this stuff at the back of that mountain of hay bales that I just showed, you can imagine that the foam actually makes its way through all the nooks and crannies that are left over, the nooks and crannies of empty space that are left over from the hay bales. And then the next step in the process is just removing the hay, which involved cutting open these plastic sort of pouches that we made and emptying them, and we had a kind of sea of hay in our studio for a while. Okay, and then we swept up the hay. And this is kind of where, and then this is painting it. We painted it white. You can see the result. It's kind of a very aggressive, maybe even ugly assemblage. And we put all kinds of objects that we have in our office in the display to as a visual sort of shorthand to describe what real artifacts might be like in these cavities. But you can imagine a great work of surrealism really occupying these boxes in a very profound way. So, why do I think this is interesting? It is because we began with the idea of inventing a process. The process that we developed responded to a set of parameters that we were given. So a budget, a space, a collection of artworks, some pragmatic requirements about how those artworks need to sort of occupy a space, a relationship between one and some of the artworks and each other. This is the only kind of context that we were given. And instead of conceiving of a form or imagining a solution in a conventional authorship sort of scenario, we set about designing a process that yielded form. So I think that that's interesting because I think often design and architects, designers, they get hung up on crystalline form. It's because our imaginations are trained to work this way. We imagine solutions in a very visual way in our minds, and then we try to sort of translate what we see in our minds into the real world using the resources around us. But that's kind of in my opinion, a backwards way of working, because you're often, you can't even perceive the inefficiencies that you bring with you into any scenario if you're thinking that way. Instead, if you begin with the context that you find yourself in, and then develop a process for making form, even if it's something aggressive and unpredictable and maybe even ugly, I think there's a lot more rigor and truth in that approach for me. So, the difference is we never sort of imagined a blob of foam with crisp boxes. There's no way that you can even begin to imagine what this might look like before you start. It just occurs as a direct result of the process. And I think that that's interesting. So where I'm going with this is that, where I'd like to go with this in the future of our practice is to continue developing this kind of scale of process-driven form, and ideally even bigger scales of it. We've explored it to a great extent at the scale of an object as industrial designers, but this is our first success at the scale of a space. This thing has a real presence to define an environment. And the next step for us, but it's still kind of an interior thing and it's a temporary installation. The next step is to take this kind of thinking into the realm of building technologies and start inventing ways of making buildings. So when you think about the buildings around us, this being a good example, it's really kind of unbelievable the way they're made. Concrete, for example, is a totally plastic material. It's liquid, it's poured, and yet it's formed into rectangular systems mostly. That doesn't make any sense structurally. Think about it, right? But that's how concrete is. That's concrete. That's how we understand concrete. Concrete is these rectangular columns and slabs, and there's an intrinsic, incongruous relationship there between what the material wants to do and the way we use it. And it's like that with almost everything around us. So I guess I'll end at that. That's basically all I have to say.
So the first question I'm going to start with, if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
Is that okay? Now, My understanding is you were trained as a number of different design practices, but not industrial design.
I was trained as an architect.
Architect.
I went to school for architecture.
But some of my favorite pieces of your work are actually industrial design pieces. Like I loved, is it number 19, the bowl? Mm-hmm. Unbelievable. Has anybody seen the video of the making of the bowl? Number 19? For real, you haven't? Dudes, go onto YouTube and look up Omer Arbel 19 and watch the making of this bowl, which you did through a process called sand casting. How did you're a process guy, I get it, but how do you teach yourself something, how to use molten metals and sand and that process if you weren't trained in that area?
Well, it's, to answer your question truthfully, I'd have to say that I rely on collaboration. Because I believe that at a certain level you can only become really great at a few things in your life. If you really want to pursue mastership in any particular field, you have to sort of commit to one or two, maybe maximum two. You can't be an amazing glassblower, a fantastic metal caster, an architect, an interior designer, an industrial designer. You just can't. So for us, we content ourselves with our areas of interest, and whenever we begin exploring procedures or materials that we don't have experience with, we collaborate with people who do. And then it's just a question of making sure that the people we collaborate with are not only extremely skilled and intelligent materially, but also open to working in different ways.
I think some might argue that you are doing pretty well, being good at a number of things. Who has the first question? Please tell us who you are, sir. Unknown sir that I don't know at all.
Hi, I'm Boris Mann. How do you choose what to work on?
A lot of our work just comes from our own intuitive path through the world. Some of it's client-driven. Like, for example, the project I showed today was born from a design brief. I would say maybe 50% of the work and the practice comes from, the inspiration comes from external sources. A client comes to us and says, we'd like you to work on something. And the other 50% are just speculative explorations that we're fascinated with for one reason or another.
I have a short follow-up question, which is basically, how can you afford to support yourself in the exploratory aspect of it? Or do you have a goal that results in, I think I have some idea that will allow me to pay for this exploration?
So the answer to that question is actually just that enough time has passed. We've been doing this for long enough that there's a tremendous amount of momentum behind us. And so in the beginning, that was a terrible struggle. It was almost impossible to do any kind of interesting work. But I was just compelled to do it because you're only as good as your last project, kind of thing. Like whatever it is that you do, the new work that will arrive at your doorstep will be related to whatever it is you've just completed. So any compromise that you make along the way results in bigger and bigger compromises in your future, in my opinion. So even though, yes, it was almost impossible in the beginning, by now, there's already 7 years of work. The world expects from us innovation. And so if we stop doing speculative projects, we're dead, kind of thing, by now. Even though in the beginning, you're right, there was absolutely no money in it.
Okay.
Hi, Omer. How are you? I'll see if I can articulate this question. Here in the team that I've been talking with right now, we identify with what you're saying. The idea that the most, I guess, intuitive approach to the design of these objects is by actually molding them, right? Like out of what we kind of imagine. We were wondering if in this particular case, design steps back and it is more about the design of a strategy to approach the object.
That's correct.
And we wanted to know if we wanted to hear a little bit more about how did you get to approach the design of this strategy.
Okay, so if I'm understanding your question correctly, you're asking what are the internal tools that we've developed in order to define the process that we're inventing? Is that right?
Yes, because it's not a traditional way of approaching the design problem. I think some of us would like to hear more. First, confirm that yes, this is indeed about design taking over the definition of a strategy, right? Design as a verb, maybe, rather than like something static, and yes, later on. If yes, what are the tools? What's your approach?
The biggest tool is what I said when I first began, which is to set aside your ego a little bit, because as all design involves ego on some level, because you have to project your idea, your imaginative idea of something that doesn't exist, and project it onto a world where there are parameters and limitations. So that's an egotistical thing to do. I'm not saying that necessarily that it's negative. It's just, it is what it is. But what you close yourself off to as soon as you do that is questioning basic assumptions, questioning those parameters that are surrounding you. So the first step in any kind of exploration that we do is to try to first study the context in a very, very intimate way, get to know the context that we're working in. And I don't mean just material context, but the socioeconomic context, the sort of power relationships involved, the larger ethics of a situation. And if we are able to sort of summarize and learn about our context in a really open way, and then start trying to think very pragmatically of what kind of procedures we can develop to make interesting work in that context, then usually a very, very interesting process emerges.
Let's go this direction. I'll come back to you.
Thanks. Hi. My name is Jordan. I'm an industrial designer. Mm-hmm. My question for you is, with respect to form and giving form. I'm curious, when you're attempting to achieve a deliberate result, at what point, how do you achieve a deliberate result when you surrender control to the process, and at what point do you draw the line between the deliberate nature of the design and the sort of organic sort of randomness of the process?
It's a really great question, because quite often we find ourselves in contexts where we're required to deliver very, very specific results. For example, this display system that I showed needed to have security hardware attached to the back of the artwork, and they needed to be temperature controlled, etc. In other cases, it's much more rigorous. We were designing cell phone cases a few months ago, 6 months ago. So to be totally honest, and if I was to really address that question meaningfully, I would say that we're just not very good at it. It's true. It's true. That part of our work, it always lags behind the open explorative part of our work. Luckily, the way I really think about it now, and we've matured a lot over the years too, so the way we think about it now, or at least the way I would like to structure the practice, is that we have these open explorative phases to each project, which are almost this kind of totally intuitive subconscious state that the studio's in. And then later we, almost as editors or as curators, shave away the meaningless parts of whatever discovery we've come up with, and also start involving layers of pragmatism and overlaying them onto the discovery. So it's almost like there's two things we do, and we're getting better at the pragmatic part, but it's never been our strength. It's like there's the first moment of discovery, and then there's a kind of refinement and editing process that occurs afterwards. And there's also composition that becomes a really important factor, because quite often the things that we come up with don't have an intrinsic geometric logic to them, and we have to sort of impose that as a system, as a secondary step.
I love that answer. Madam?
I love the question. Mine is really quite simple. Hi, Omer, it's Carmen.
Hi.
We loved that display unit and we thought it was a great entry to the competition. Can you just tell us why you didn't win?
I don't know. Good question. I'm not sure. I think a lot of it was that it was just extremely aggressive. And for us, that was a deliberate, it was kind of a deliberate idea about surrealism. Surrealism is no longer a revolutionary movement. It hasn't been for 100 years or how long, you know, like, no, not even 80 years. So it occurred to us that a survey of surrealist artwork, I mean, we've seen those images a million times online, and that an exhibition, a current exhibition of surrealist work needed to bring another layer of consideration to the work, another way of seeing surrealism, or maybe what it might mean today. What are some what are some mutated forms of surrealism that exist in our culture or are relevant to our culture now? And so for us, we wanted to make a very aggressive, automatic, if you will, exhibition system that almost challenged the pieces that it was housing. But from a conservative curatorial point of view, we were taking a lot of attention away from the work itself. And I think that's probably why we didn't win.
Well, the casing becomes the art as well.
We thought it was interesting.
What a concept. Thank you.
Yeah.
Maybe on this side?
Hi, my name is Estefania, and I wanted to ask, based on that question, if you ever feel you have to hold back on certain projects so that you can please a pitch.
Yeah, not anymore. I used to. I don't need to anymore. So they don't build it. Who cares? Like, do I really care? I'll build it, you know, in some other context, a favorable context.
Hey, my name is Sandy Pell. I'm just actually wondering, you mentioned that you had some questions around the word creativity.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if you could maybe break that down. Is that would you include your inspiration, your environment, your process? Like, how does creativity really break down? How would you define it?
I don't think it's our job to question what that is. I think humans are creative. They make new things. And I think that that's mysterious, and I think it should stay mysterious.
So you wouldn't have a definition really for the word creativity?
I think it's a mistake to try.
Okay, a few more. You were being patient over here.
Hey, when we were discussing the form that you made, for me, it conjured like this, when you're on the mountain and snow kind of drifts over certain trees and it kind of builds and layers. That's what I thought of when I saw the piece. And of course, this could be coming at it from the other side, and I hope this isn't too abstract a question to answer. But to what extent do you think regionality or culture or these types of things enter into the creative process? And when you were talking about collaboration, do you rely sometimes on, certainly other disciplines, but then how much do you rely on maybe other cultures, international perspectives, and that sort of thing?
Yeah, I think that regionalism is kind of a dead idea in design. Because people travel so much, and because we are so exposed to media, to information, that it's very, very, very... The way we position ourselves subconsciously already involves all of our peers immediately on any given day, throughout the world. And so the idea of regionalism is a little bit limited just for those simple facts. On the other hand, I can't deny this is where I wake up. I wake up in this city, I go to work in this city, this is where I come back to when I travel. So what does that mean? And I respond to the colors that I see in this city. There are very particular ways that light sort of behaves in this city that are different from other places. For example, when there's a cloud cover, but the sun sort of sneaks in underneath, so you get this amazing contrast of gray and bright white yellow. That doesn't happen anywhere else. So those kinds of sensual experiences must make their way somehow into the work, but I wouldn't be able to define how, and I don't think it's important to try.
Hi, my name is Gloria and I'm a student, and I was wondering what you do or think about during your free time, because I reckon that you don't spend all of your time on work.
What do I do in my free time? What do I think about, or what do I do? What do I do in my free time? I don't know. What do I do? I spend a lot of time. I've been cooking a lot recently. Like researching where to find the best cantaloupe in Vancouver to make cantaloupe ice cream. What else? I've started learning how to swim. I'm in my mid-30s and I can't swim, so I'm learning to swim. I don't know, what else? What do I think about? There's a lot of things I think. I read a lot. I read a tremendous amount. I don't know if I've answered your question.
I think that's going to do it for today, folks. Thank you very much. Thanks, Omer.
Thank you.